afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's meeting, Children and Families Overview and Scrutiny Committee. As usual, the meeting will be broadcast and is being broadcast live via the County Council's website. It will also be available viewing after the meeting. Can I please ask that all members and officers have their microphone on mute until they wish or are invited to speak? I've received apologies from Canon Carolyn Lewis, Councillor Victoria and Councillor Hills. Thank you. So move to the first item, which is on the agenda, which is the minutes of the meeting held on June the 4th. And I move that these meetings are taken as read, confirmed and signed. They're on pages 5 to 10 in your agenda pack. Acceptable? Yes, thank you. Sign them and give them. I think I was at the end. Item 2 is question time, and I have received a question from Hunt. Question and its responses have been circulated to members committee prior to the start of this meeting and will be taken as read. I would like to remind members that there is no discussion be held on these. Mr. Hunt, do you have a supplementary question you would like to ask?
Thank you, Chair.
Right, we now move to item 4 is urgent matters. I have no urgent items. Item 5, declarations of interest. In respect of items on the agenda, I have not received any. Does anybody have any declaration of interest they wish to? Mrs. Jordan.
I'm trustee of Send Hub.
Mr. Martin.
I'm a co-chair of the Leicestershire Send Hub.
Item 6 is the declaration of no party whip. I have not received any information about the party whip. Item 7 is presentation of petitions. I have not received any petitions. So we're now moving on to the first substantive item, which is transforming send and inclusion in Leicestershire programme update. Starts on page 11 of your agenda item, and I now move to Alison Bradley.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the report is to report back on the developments of the Transforming Send and Inclusion programme for Leicestershire. The purpose of the report is to give us an update to the committee since we last reported in January 2024. I draw your attention to the background section, which is 9 to 11. Reminder that the programme has been defined by the desire to involve children, young people and their families as much as possible, and it's critical that they are the heart of all the making around the plans for future send system. Paragraphs 12 were the financial benefits and the medium-term financial strategy position. The TESOL programme is focusing on improving the outcomes experiences for children and young families, and this in turn delivers the financial benefits. The programme, as currently delivers 36.5 million in reductions over the 7-year period up to 2028-29 and is on track to benefit. In paragraph 13, the financial performance is monitored monthly both within the TESOL programme and the medium financial strategy monitoring cycles, and a process for updating financial plan between the financial strategy cycles is under development. In paragraph 14, the financial performance the 23-24 is better than forecast, largely as a result of the TESOL work and taken to develop more robust financial processes and data accuracy. The high needs expenditure, despite cost reductions arising from the TESOL and continued investment in local provision of the 5 million over the new medium-term financial strategy period of 24-25 spend, remains greater than the high needs block grant of the dedicated schools grant. In paragraph 15, the Leicestershire SEND system, the increasing demand in the local SEND system continues to affect the financial position of the high needs block. And the dedicated schools grant, as well as the ability to deliver assessments in the statutory deadlines. Between 2017 and 2024, there's been a 90% increase in the number of education and healthcare plans in Leicestershire, and that's from the position of 3,350 6,377. This compares to that national increase over the same period of England for 100%, and in the East, Leicestershire statistical neighbours saw a 97% increase between 2007 and 2024. Paragraph 16, the increase in demand is leading to a significant drift and delay within the service, particularly noted in the education and healthcare plan assessment process. That means that the statutory deadlines as set out in the Code of Practice 2014 are still not being met. In turn, this has continued to lead in the large number of complaints received from parents and carers and those in the education system. There's still also a number of to tribunal, often leading to overturning the decisions made. Paragraph 17, there's still considerable against the decision, and over the years there's been a reduction. Much of this will be the robust decision making taking place with strengthened communication programme. Paragraph 18, education and healthcare plans in Leicestershire. The proportion of education and healthcare plans issued within the 20-week time frame has slowly increased since 2022. Chart in the next paragraph does demonstrate that there's been 20 weeks from the 1% 2022 to 6.2% 12 months to July 2024. Significant further improvement measure is anticipated that the current activity reducing the backlogs for educational psychology assessments, education and healthcare plans require drafting an issue of placement. Paragraph 19, the service aims to progress with an alternative solution to ensure that assessments are undertaken in a timely way. It's been ascertained that whilst waiting for advice is the main driver for poor timeliness, and additional educational psychologists have been sourced assessments, and alongside exploring more efficient ways to ensure good quality educational advice is produced for the assessments. Paragraph 20, the order to improve the quality of education healthcare plans on a monthly disciplinary basis is audited so that samples of education and healthcare plans are looked at to consider the way the content of the plans is against best practice. Just a quick reminder, in paragraph 21 around the TESOL programme, it's predicated on four structures, those of the inclusive practice, service transformation, accurate information and communication, and engagement. Then finally, moving into paragraph 34, the TESOL programme is now moving into the next steps. So where there's been positive progress in the improvement of services for children with special educational needs, there's still a lot of work to be done. The TESOL programme will continue to drive and embed the current, as well as consider how the SEND system in Leicestershire can go further with the new opportunities to improve and be able to manage within an allocation. Alongside this, there's a draft and a local area inclusion plan, referred to as the LATE, that has been developed to replace the existing self-evaluation framework for the local SEND and inclusion partnership. The document is part of the work that's taking place with the change programme alongside the DFE. Work also falls in line with the work with Leicester City and Rutland. In paragraph 36, the transition to the transforming SEND and inclusion programme work is now moving into a continuous improvement programme, which will enable us to continue and will be embedded as a business as usual service. And a plan has been to establish and deliver this work. Got a new service that has been structured and repurposing existing staff from across the department, quality and performance and change skills to continue the work. This service has been in place since July 2020. The service will consist of education quality change roles and will, in collaboration with information management and service delivery, move forward the service and plans that decide that. Significant progress has been made through the TESOL continuous improvement work across the department, looking at the scope, the timeliness, the governance and the resources for the next phase of the programme. And that includes the work on the Delivering Better Values, the Change Programme and the Accelerated Progress Plan. In addition to this, the TESOL programme itself will have 2 health checks, one of which took place during July and the second is to take place during October. The health checks will provide an opportunity to reflect where progress has been made, provides feedback on where focus should be next period to have the biggest impact. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Alison. Mrs. Taylor, as lead member, did you have any point you'd like to raise at this? Not at the moment, thank you, Chair. Thank you. Mr. Hills.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Alison and the officers, for your report. I'm just going over historical notes, and I'm going to use our favourite phrase in this room at this meeting, EHCP. Last time we were met, there was a 45% increase in demand. We've got a 5-year trend of increased complaints and delays. It would appear to me here, colleagues, that we just seem to be effectively throwing the same answer at the same problem in what I can only describe as a churn-like cycle. And I think when we disbanded, or met last time and disbanded, we were looking at the complexity of the hoops that we have to go through to get these things done, like the provision of the sites. I've got to be very, very clear. I'm not trying to victimise or demonise anyone at the council, but it seems that we've inflated the problem. And we keep saying this, and I know this is a national picture, but is it not within our gift or our power, or possibly at the very edges of our jurisdiction, to actually challenge, why do we have to have a PhD, a doctor, educational psychologist, to carry out effectively something that is an administrative test? Now, I appreciate it's not anybody's fault in this room, but it's a drum that I'm going to continuously bang for as long as the people we represent. I've worked with families who are adversely and have been adversely affected by this. And it doesn't sit well that you say to them, yeah, well, the issue is we don't have enough ed psychs. And of course, they're allowed to mine and dig deeper. And we say we don't have enough ed psychs because they're expensive. There's not many of them. And I just think that the point of impasse is this ed psychs thing. Do we really, is there absolute necessity that it has to be an ed psych that does that? And I know it's perhaps not within the gift of the people in this room to answer this here, but are we taking an assertive or an aggressive stance on this to push back and say we could reduce the bottleneck by reducing the administrative processes that we've created? That seems to be the impasse. Thanks again, Alison, and thank you to your officers, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And you'd like to come back, Jane?
Thank you. Just a couple of things, really. One, I think we need to remember that educational psychologists are in post and are vital to undertake a really detailed assessment of children and young people. So I think, and the qualifications that they need to have equips them to do that full assessment of children. So it isn't an administrative, it's a really full, detailed, professional assessment of children. I think we also need to remember that our children and their families deserve to have the best possible assessment to meet their needs, and we need to make sure we've got the right people doing it. So you're right, there's a huge amount of input into getting somebody to become an educational psychologist, which means that they are costly and there aren't many of them, but they have the qualification for a reason and they do a really good job in terms of that kind of detailed assessment. Nevertheless, the fact that we and other authorities across the country are unable to secure enough educational psychologists to undertake the assessments is also not good, which is leading to the delays that you've rightly pointed out as well. So the code of practice sets out really clearly that we need to undertake educational psychology advice across all of our assessments, and we as a local authority have no choice in that. That's about the code of practice. That's what's set out as a standard. What we are doing across the local authority is looking at how we can make sure that we get the best possible educational psychology advice for our children, which means that we can kind of move through more advices. So we are taking action. We're not taking action in terms of not utilising educational psychologists where we need to. We're not taking action that means that we won't be undertaking really good advice for children, because that's not okay as well. But we are looking, and what we know is that we haven't been able to secure as many educational psychologists as we need. And so your point of keeping doing the same thing is a really good one. We've got to stop doing that. But what we are doing is working hard on an initiative that is looking at who is the best possible person to undertake educational advice with the oversight of educational psychologists to make sure we still have that educational psychology advice, but how can we do things differently as well in terms of moving through, because the delay for children in terms of getting an EHCP is also not tolerable either.
Sorry, Chair, if I could just come back. I want to be very clear in this forum. I'm not in any way suggesting that we dilute the quality or integrity of the delivery of practitioners who are looking after the most vulnerable members of our society, including children and families with SCN. But research suggests to me that it takes 5 to 8 years to train in this role. You have to be at PhD qualification, and the cost to the learner is £60,000 to £80,000, and the remuneration is nowhere near that once they secure the post. So it's almost like we've created this vortex that we can't get out of. But Jane, thank you, and I'm not trying to dilute the quality of what you're doing or what they're doing, and I would want and insist that the best person was put in front of that child for assessment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, before I come to Mr. Martin, did you want to come in on that, Mrs. Taylor?
Yeah, just to put what Jane said, but I think we need to roll back a little bit more. Is what we need to do is have children supported in mainstream school to have their needs met. So that the only reason children and families come to us for EHCPs because their needs are not being met in mainstream school. So for me, the fundamental issue is to fund schools properly, to be able to be inclusive of proper, then we won't have this problem. So for me, this is a symptom of the fact that schools are not able to be inclusive as they should be. So the majority of children should be in mainstream, even with special education needs, and have their needs supported. The local authority should be dealing with a very small amount of children that have really complex special education needs that need our support. So for me, we need to look a bit further down the stream about why children are coming and families are coming to us for HCPs rather than dealing with the symptoms. We need to deal with that. So for me, that's the thing I'm lobbying government on, is that we need to be more inclusive in schools and make sure they're funded properly to be inclusive.
Thank you. Mr. Martin.
Thank you very much for the report. Really interesting. My question is on we have a lot of information here around increase in numbers, so increase in amount of pupils. I think one thing to remember with that is obviously the 2014 Act changed the age limit of when a child is statemented at. So 18 to 25 was the change. So you have a 7-year 1/18th increase, which is built into the figures that local authorities have had to deal with. It's not just an increase in demand, i.e. there's more disabled children. It's that we are lifting the upper limit from 18 to 25, and therefore they keep their EHCPs longer, which is one of the cost things. But the other point is that it's amount of children times cost of placement. That's what gives us the sort of the overall amount. So a lot of the focus on this report is on the amount of children and the increase in demand. But if you have 100 children that all cost £10,000 versus 120 children that cost £6,000, actually the increase in the amount of children, the overall budget goes down. So what I'd really like to see is what work's being done on the commissioning of specialist places, how much they cost, and which type of setting is costing us the most. And even more importantly, which type of setting has the largest increase year on year in what they are charging. I know some of our own local authority special schools haven't increased fees for a very long time. Is that the same in the independent sector? Are they, is that the driver of our financial worries? And what can we do within the legal framework, within the legislation that we have, and then lobby for obviously change? How can we affect the per pupil specialist cost, not just the amount of pupils that need specialist support from the local authority? And that would be a really interesting thing to bring to this report, because then you can see both sides of the picture of the increase in demand, but also how is the increase or decrease or no increase of cost hitting us in the local authority market and then the sort of private sector market as well.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Jane?
Yeah, just a quick response to that, because I think it's a really good idea. So I think one of the things that we know is you're absolutely right. It's both an increase in numbers and we are seeing a change in unit costs as well. So you're absolutely right. It's both. And the increase in demand is causing both a financial challenge as well as a kind of operational challenge. But you're right, it would be less impactful if the unit cost remained the same as well. One of the things we do know from the data, and we'll do what you're requesting, because I think that's a really good idea in terms of understanding need. I think it helps understand some of the demand, but it also helps some of the shift costs. What we do know from the budget this year is that we're actually spending more on children in mainstream. So that's one of the things that we know from our budget. I can't recall anything else off the top of my head, I'm afraid. But what we do know from our kind of budget analysis this year is that we are spending more on kind of additional money going into mainstream to support children. So I think the other variable that we probably need to understand and explore a bit more is around complexity and understanding that the unit costs both could well relate to inflation costs, but it could also relate to complexity as well. And I think there's a more nuanced look at that and what is it that we're supporting where, and where is where is it best that we're supporting children, and how can we make best use of the money that we've got in order to support them. But we can do exactly what you ask around really understanding the numbers and understanding some of the cost differentials as well about where we're seeing increases. And what we also know is that we're seeing increases in numbers in certain settings, but not all settings as well. So we can definitely look at that. Be helpful. Thank you.
If I can just come back in as well, just to reassure you, that is the work that we've been doing with our commissioning department. In fact, this morning we were looking at analysing the ISP data, the independent sector data, and looking at it in terms of some of the level. But I think the bit that you've asked us, I will strengthen the ask on that as well. So thank you.
Can I come back? Yeah, I think it's really interesting to understand then if there is differences in costs, which I think we all know there is, depending on different types of sector. What control do we have to control them costs? Because understanding what our powers are and what our powers aren't, I think is really important in understanding where we can have control. You know, we've done an excellent job on the internal side of Senna and, you know, the TESOL work there. It's now how do we bring into our control the external factors that we may have less control over, and understanding where our sort of abilities to make savings, because, you know, the financial situation isn't great, for that going forward, because an opening of one whole new school by an independent sector school will blow all the savings of TESOL in one go. And I think really understanding that, what our control we have would be really positive. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Did anybody else? Did you want to come back, Mrs. Taylor? No. Any more? No. Thank you very much. Well, it's to note report, so I presume that's all right with everybody, and the points have been taken, and the officers will come back to us in due course. So we now move on to item 10, which is on pages. No, I think I've skipped one. Haven't I? Item 9 which is the Ofsted inspection of the local authority, social care services, which is on page 21 of your agenda. And I think we all know that this was really good news, so I'll pass over to Jane.
Thank you, Chair. So the report that you've got in front of you, it sets out the outcome of our recent Ofsted inspection of children's social care services in Leicestershire. And by way of background, Ofsted undertakes inspections of all local authority children's services for areas that hold statutory responsibility for delivering children's services. And it particularly focuses on those children in need of help and protection, children in care and care leavers, and the effectiveness of leaders and managers. And they're also interested in the impact that we all have on the lives of children and young people, and also the quality of professional practice. So the inspection framework looks at all of that. As a department, we were last inspected in 2019, where the outcome was that we were graded that we required improvement to be good. So this was an expected inspection. We knew that they would be coming back to undertake the full inspection of us. And indeed, they did come back in April. They were with us for 3 weeks. And there were 6 inspectors that came and looked at the department, particularly around early help and social care, and some elements of our education services as well. So in terms of the inspection findings, the gradings were as detailed in paragraph 10. So there are 4 areas we were judged to be outstanding in terms of our impact of leaders on social work practice and children and families. Good for experiences and progress of children who need help and protection. Outstanding for experience and progress of children in care. And outstanding for the experience and progress of care leavers as well. And they judged that our overall effectiveness of children's services across Leicestershire was judged then also to be outstanding. So really fantastic outcome for the department and also for the county council as well. The report then goes into the details really around why and what they found and why they judged us to be outstanding overall. They were really clear that when they came in April that they could see significant improvement since 2019 across all areas of the department, and that the improvement was underpinned by what they could see as a really ambitious and child-focused leadership that's really created a culture that enables or puts experiences of children at the heart of the practice that we deliver. They particularly commented on our positive engagement around the national social care reforms. They commented on the fact that most of our children in care and care leavers receive an outstanding service, and the vast majority of our children live in stable homes with carers who are supportive and ambitious for their children. They commented on our personal advisors who work with our care leavers, who are tenacious and determined. And they were really clear that they could see that we'd successfully created a work environment whereby the workforce really understands the importance of relationships, long-lasting relationships, strong relationships with children and families. And they could see that as a result of that, many families achieve positive change and improved outcomes for children. They recognised that we had a well-trained and well-supported and motivated workforce, and the overwhelming majority of our staff who met with inspectors told them that they liked working for Leicestershire and that they really value the investment and support that they've had from their managers. The inspectors did note 2 areas that they said that we needed to have a look at to improve. The first one was around some improvements they'd identified to those families who are going through the child protection process, where they wanted us to make sure that families fully understood the process and that the decisions that were made by court happen in a timely way. And the other area that they said they wanted us to focus on was making sure that the first child protection conferences always happen on time as well. So just to conclude, it's a really significant achievement for Leicestershire County Council and also for children and families across Leicestershire. And it's, in my view, a real testament to the leadership team, which is led by Sharon, who's the Assistant Director of that area, who have absolutely driven this work in terms of being child focused. They've focused on improvement and a really strong, robust improvement journey to achieve the outcome of this. And also, this couldn't have been achieved without the workforce that we have, and they are a hugely tenacious and caring workforce who have managed to deliver, who both manage, and deliver our services. And we're extremely fortunate to have such a strong workforce who tirelessly focus on getting it right for children as well. So really proud of the outcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Frisby.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jane and Sharon. I think amongst you, it's an exceptional result, and to get an overall outstanding is a real coup for Leicestershire. The only fly in the ointment, I'll always have one, is the continuous improvement, keeping the ball in the air. That's a huge legacy of achievement for you to maintain. And sadly, as a teacher myself, I've never got to those heady heights. I'll be very clear. Sadly, I always think there's limited directions of travel when you're at the top of the tree. So I just hope that we can maintain that, and I'm sure you will. But on behalf of where we come from and my patch, thank you. It's an amazing achievement, and I think we should shout what you did even louder, because I know that the sort of backdrop of what that comes from, and to get that is extraordinary. So thank you, Chair.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Taylor, I didn't come back to you when I should have done, and then I'll move to Mr. Hunt.
Thank you, Chair. I know it's been said many times, but we're still sort of floating on the top of this. And I walked into the office this morning after not being here for a couple of weeks, and the balloons are still up that say outstanding. So that was a nice view that when I walked in this morning to cheer me up ahead of a very busy day. But I know Jane and the team as well won't take the credit for it, but I do need to put on record that they have worked enormously hard, given up a lot of their own family time and any other time that they might have free to make sure we get to where we were. So I do need to put on my record for them. But like Jane said, it's down to the whole staff of all the department. They've all worked incredibly hard to get to this point, and you feel that when you walk into the office. The culture in the office is absolutely fantastic, and we're all there for one purpose, and that's to improve the lives of children of Leicestershire. So this is great for us, it's great for our staff, it's great for our families, but it's also good for us moving forward with our recruitment of staff, because everyone wants to work for an outstanding local authority. So this really puts us in good stead. And I take Mr. Frisby's point, when you're at the top, it's very hard to stay there, but we are continually scrutinising ourselves. You scrutinise us as well. So there's always things that we can do to improve. So I certainly won't be taking my eye off the ball, but we need to revolve in this wonderful rating for us. So yeah, I am really pleased for the whole department, but also for the council, and also in my role as lead member, I've been supported by the cabinet and the chief exec as well. So it's across the board support, and I think we've got a really good culture here that I really enjoy working as a lead member for this. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Mr. Hunt.
Thanks, Chair. I'd echo these points that have been made and the success of the department. I mean, I put particular emphasis on what Deborah's just said about the culture of the department, because we as members, we can't float around the department and talk to folk and so on, but I'm sure Deborah can and does, and that is so important in the public service particularly. Mr. Frisby's been extraordinarily eloquent this afternoon in both his contributions, so I can't better what he said. But there is always a feeling there that when you've done really well, you know, you've got to stay there and so on. Apart from that, I didn't notice it, but there's presumably a sign outside that says "standing" across the building. Yeah, like our local schools. Thanks very much. Yeah.
And Mr. Martin.
Yeah, just to reiterate, absolutely huge thank you as Parent Governor Representative and Chair of the Parent Carer Forum. To know that children in Leicestershire are safer because of you guys is phenomenal. So thank you ever so much.
And I think you can see, Jane and the team, that you have the full support and grateful thanks of this whole committee. And also, we would really appreciate it if you passed it on. I'm sure they know, but we all here do appreciate them very much, their hard work. They're often in the background, mostly in the background. We don't see them, they don't see us, but we appreciate everything they do. Here in the building, out in the field, everywhere. So thank you very much, and well, very well done. I hope you've celebrated besides balloons. Thank you. Right, we now move on to item 10 on page 39, which is the Q1 2024-25 performance report. And And you taking it through this, Sharon? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just going to introduce the report as I normally do. This time, there is a focus on the progress of work in education and SENS. So I'll then hand over to Alison, who will hand back to me to take us through the social care performance. So I'll introduce the report. It is our normal update to the committee on the Q1 performance, and I'll pass over to Alison to give the detail from Education and SEND.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Chair. So the Education and SEND performance, as we've already noted in the TESOL report earlier, the number of education and healthcare plans issued in Leicestershire continues to increase year on year, with the total number of active cases reaching 6,377 in January 2024, and this is 176 higher than the previous year. Overall, the education and healthcare plans have increased 90% since 2017. And it's noted that the rate of increase appears to be stabilising the rate of increase appears to be stabilising in recent years after a period of abnormally high between 2017 and 2020. The average increase for statistical neighbours between 2017 to 2024 is 97%. So we are noting that we've had a hike in our numbers, and that is also noted in statistical neighbours too. Moving through the report, in paragraph 7, the Department for Education, the demand for education, health and care plans has continued to increase on a month-on-month basis, with the demand around 20 additional assessments per month since 2023 to an average of 126 per month in July 2024. And the 12-month rolling numbers request now stands at 1,509 in July 2024, and this is the highest volume of requests ever received and is placing extreme pressure on the Special Educational Needs Department. Again, in paragraphs 8 and 9, the proportion of education and healthcare plans issued within the 20-week target has been formally published by the Department for Education for 2023, and Leicestershire has shown a small improvement in the measures from 3.8% in 2022 to 6% in 2023. This is an area, as we've just discussed previously, that's of considerable focus for improvement and a recovery plan around how we bring that timeliness closer to 20-week target, incorporating the activity to reduce those backlogs, and the request for assessment has been created and progress on that will be closely monitored. In paragraph 9, the average time to complete the education and healthcare plan remains well over the statutory completion time of 20 weeks, and the measure has increased on an average to 48 weeks at the end of July 24. Moving through to paragraph 10, which is around the admissions. So the response to the contacts for around school admissions continues to improve, with the service consistently answering on average 80% of the calls received. And this has shown that the admissions service has shown considerable improvement in processing of school applications during the term, with 78% applications processed within a 15-day target in June 2024, compared to 34% in the same period of June 2023. In paragraph 11, the need for the support from the early years special educational needs department. There's a rise in the caseload there, 795 children and their families in July 2024, and this is 102 children. This is an increase of 102 from the same period last year. Based on the 2-year-old health check reviews at the end of April 2024, the number of children needing support likely to continue to increase is a significant number, and having seen that their needs are not being met on the developmental milestones in 4 or more of those areas, these children are likely to have more specialist needs in the future, and is an early indication of the demand from the early years service data. In paragraph 12, the referrals to the inclusion service have reduced over time, with a peak of 683 new referrals in 2020 to 289 in 2023 and 158 between January and July 2024. There's around 30 fewer referrals that have been received in the same period in 2023, and that they're usually for children missing education being the highest reason for those referrals to the inclusion service, and making up 55% of the referrals in 2024, and the remainder of the caseload is broken down into children with medical needs, children who are NEET, and the children who are electively home educated. And The children who are elective and home education make up less than 1% of the current cases, compared to 29% in 2022 and 13% in 2023. I'll hand over to Sharon to do the middle section now.
Okay, thanks, Alison. So paragraph 13 to 21 takes the committee through from the children's social care, keeping children safe, the figures, the benchmarking figures that we report on nationally. So as the committee will hopefully see, that the percentage of children subject to child protection plans and the data and the dates at which those plans need to be reviewed, we are continuing to make progress and are in the 90% plus within that area. Although it's not a benchmarking performance indicator, as it was recalled within the Ofsted report, initial case conferences, I can let committee know that over the last several months, our performance in that area as well is also really high and improving. Percentage of children become subject to a child protection plan for a second or subsequent time. So that figure decreased slightly in the last quarter. It's an area that we retain very careful monitoring of. We wouldn't want children to be subject to more than one period of child protection concerns in their life. Sometimes that happens for an unrelated incident or reason. So we always audit all those cases. We always look at whether the step down support was robust enough, and we always look at what the period of time is between those child protection plans. So whilst we keep an eye on that figure, what I can report to the committee is these are not children that are going onto a child protection plan, coming off and very quickly going back on. They are usually circumstances that have a long period of time in between. Domestic abuse is an issue for these families and these children, but it's a focus of work for us. The percentage of re-referrals in the last 12 months, so that number has increased slightly. We aim to be around 22%, would be seen to be a healthy rate of children and families that are re-referred. Again, we audit a number of those cases every month just to check on what the circumstances are and what any learning is for our practice. Section 7, paragraph 17 rather gives you the percentage of assessments completed within 45 days. Our performance in first response is much higher than the 83%, but we report this figure across the whole of the service, and there are always some reasons why those assessments may take longer due to the complexity of the child or their family experience. Percentage of care leavers in suitable accommodation, we continue to perform really highly against that measure. Those care leavers in education or employment and training, although there was a decrease in Q1, we monitor this very closely, and over a 12-month period, we usually perform relatively well against that indicator, but there are certain times of the year that performance indicator is hit upon with the measure. So again, we keep a close eye on that. Percentage of children in care who had dental checks was a slight decrease, but the number of children in care who had an annual health assessment had increased. So again, performance that we keep a close eye on. And in relation to the last part that is my area of responsibility, which is youth and justice, you can see that the performance is reported into the Youth Justice Management Board. We have been implementing over the last 12 months a new system that is improving our access to performance data on a daily basis. But because of that, it means that only national indicators can be reported on within this report. So they are the sections from me, and I'll hand back to Alison, who'll take you through the early years and the education.
Thank you, Sharon. So paragraphs 23 and 24 relate to the early years sector. Paragraph 24 in particular notes the recent national policy change to broaden the eligibility for funded early educational entitlement to all 2-year-olds, and the data presented in paragraph 23 reflects this. So in the summer term 2024, 66% of eligible 2-year-olds took up their funded fee, and this was a decrease from the spring term. For 3-year-olds, the figure was 92.9%, and this was an increase overall from the spring term 24. Overall, 98.2% of 2- and 3-year-olds took up their fee in high quality provision in the summer term 2024, which was a slight increase from the spring term, sorry. Moving it through to paragraphs 25 to 27, noting the Ofsted judgments for school. So paragraph 25 notes that the primary schools, the good or outstanding was 90.3%. This represents no change from the previous quarter. Paragraph 26, the secondary schools, good or outstanding was 77.8%, and this is no change related to quarter 4. In paragraph 27, the percentage of pupils educated in good or outstanding schools was 85.4% at the end of quarter 1, and this was a decrease of 0.5 from quarter 4. Moving through to the admissions, so in paragraph 28, the percentage of applicants obtaining their first time preference in primary schools in 2024 was 95%, approximately 6.6 thousand out of 6.9 thousand applicants. This was 0.7% higher than in 2023 at 94.3%, and the figure was in with the second quartile of other local authorities. In paragraph 29, the percentage of applicants obtaining their first preference for secondary school in 2024 was 91.5%, so approximately 6.8 thousand out of 7.4 thousand applicants. This was 0.8% higher than in 2023, and the figure was in the first quartile of local authorities. Paragraph 30, on the elective home education, there were 1,279 at the end of quarter 1. This is an increase of 151 students compared to the end of quarter 1, 23-24. In paragraph 32, the percentage of children who are in need from at the end of quarter 1 was 0.92%, 139 students, and this was a small increase compared to the end of quarter 4. The number of permanent exclusions in Leicestershire, the number of permanent exclusions is at the highest level, but it is only a small number compared to other authorities on there. So at the end, the number of permanent exclusions was 779% higher than in previous years, 67 in 2023 compared to 24 in 21-22. And the number of fixed term suspensions from Leicestershire schools as a percentage of school population in 2022-23 for the academic year was 3.16%, and this rate is 25% higher and in the last academic year, and is seeing an increase to previous years. That's all a note on there. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Alison and Sharon. Mrs. Taylor, did you want to come back at this stage?
No, happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I apologise. I feel like I'm representing the whole half of this side of the room at the moment with Leon. So, first of all, again, congratulations on your 91% satisfaction and transition into schools of choices. I think that's a really good statistic, and appreciate how complex that is. I'm going to ask a really basic question, officers, if that's okay. And it's one I've often wondered. In Tracy, please don't go into detail. How does the fee actually physically work, the funded early education? Do they actually get vouchers? Do they get choices? They obviously don't get cash, but I mean, I'm a childless, I don't have children, so I wouldn't know, but I'm just wondering how can I elect to go to any nursery school, and is it I'm just wondering about how it's mechanised. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, officers.
You had to get a code by the end of last week, basically. So you get a code, and then the mechanism is, in very short terms, is then translated through the provider of which you choose to have your childcare from.
And I can go to any nursery with my code, and they should accept that as cash, so to speak, sort of, metaphorically.
Yeah, it's essentially the code enables you to unlock the money. The money goes from the local authority to the provider, so the parent doesn't see the money. So the fee is the fee is an entitlement, so it's a number of hours that you are entitled to as a parent, and then the provider then takes your code because they know that you're entitled, and the provider then essentially invoices the council for the those children that are eligible. So there's no money given to parents, but it's an entitlement, and you're absolutely right. You can then choose which provision you would get your entitlement from.
Sorry, I apologise. So it's a wooden dollars like affair, yeah.
Essentially, yeah. And it's
and sorry,
between
forgive me. I should know this. I should know this better. There's a finite window that those applications could be made in. Good.
Mr. Martin.
There is, but it's accessible all year as well. So it'll take me hours to go through the complexities of that. But
no,
but
please don't. It's fine.
You can get the entitlement whenever you need to, but there are certain payment windows which mean that getting the code on the right time.
Thank you, Jane. I understand the principles. Thank you, Chair.
And then before I move to Mr. Martin, following on from that point, does the council then invoice the government? So to get the money,
need to write an essay on that as well, Mrs. Farber. Essentially, yes.
Right, but at times the council could be out of pocket, waiting for the funding to come through from central government.
Yeah. So there's some challenges around how the money's transported over, which does at times leave the council out of pocket. You're absolutely right. That the funding is passed over to us based on census information that's gathered from providers at a certain point in the time of year. And so depending on the number of children in the provision at that point of year would then depend. So it's a hugely complex process that we have to undertake in order to provide the early years funding position.
Thank you very much. Mr. Martin.
2 points. So just first a bit of housekeeping on with the ending of the outstanding good with the Ofsteds. Obviously for the performance report that will change going forward, won't it? So understanding how we get that delivered for scrutiny might take some thought in terms of ensuring that we don't let slip it getting better or worse or whatever else, just something to sort of consider. My questions are around 30 to 34, I think, about children out of school. There's some pretty big jumps in them numbers. 13.4% choosing to electively home educate in 1 quarter is massive, isn't it? It really is a big jump. I mean, that'd put if 4 quarters of that, and you're talking some pretty drastic increases. I know the explanation in 31 around the pandemic and health concerns. I'd feel that might be a little bit out of date now. And I know that on the forms for choosing to electively home educate, parents say why they're doing it. It'd be great to get an understanding of why parents are, because that is a really big number to be sort of jumping by. And if anybody has any thoughts on that in the interim about the changes now, so far away from the pandemic, that would be really interesting to see. And then the sort of same point again for 31, 32, 33, 34 about children not being in school. I think I've spoke at this committee at length about exclusions and suspension, so I won't repeat myself on my sort of really strong beliefs on the negativity that has on children. But I think it's something that is increasingly a problem within the county, and I know all the sort of understanding doesn't lay at the local authority's door. It is very much to do with schools. It is very much to do with changing demographics, understanding socioeconomic realities, etc. But it is really worrying, and it'd be great to get your understanding on what the solutions are and how deeply we understand the problem right now, and sort of any thoughts going forward. Thank you.
Yeah, just a couple of things on that. Just on your first point around how we monitor the outcomes. So yeah, you're absolutely right. So the government has announced this week that they will remove the headline judgment, but obviously schools at the moment will still have the the kind of 4 heading judgments as well. So you're right, we will need to think about how we articulate what our schools look like in Leicestershire. What I think will probably move to would be to align ourselves with the plans with Ofsted, which is to look carefully at how we report on the new report card when it comes through. And I'm saying this because it links to my answer for your question around number 30 as well. So what we know is that Ofsted are interested in looking at schools much more holistically and understanding what good looks like in terms of a much broader range of measures, and have pointed this week to a dashboard of indicators essentially that could tell you what a school was like. And then moving on to the so we'll then have to think about how we report that. You're absolutely right, as part of scrutiny. In terms of your question around the HCE numbers, I'm not negating the increase. The increase is on a year, so it's at the end of quarter 1 in 2023 compared to the end of quarter 1 in 2024. So it's a year's jump. It's still big. It's still a big jump, but it's a year, not a quarter. But nevertheless, we are still seeing an increase in the number of children who are being electively home educated. And I'd written exactly the same note next to the paragraph 31 around really understanding the reasons for the increase in electively home educated. So what we know post-pandemic is that that there has been a culture shift around engagement with schools broadly across the country. We know that, and we know that there has been a shift in terms of both attendance, all sorts of things as well. We can understand a little bit more about why children are actively home educated. So I think we could put a bit more around some of the feedback, like you said, on the form, so we can unpick that. And we know that it isn't just a trend for Leicestershire, that nationally we're seeing far more children being electively home educated as well. The point you made around the general rise in children not being in school, we would equally share your concern with. And I think the challenges there with different reasons for each of the kind of reasons why children are out of school. So the rise in the number of permanent exclusions is a significant worry. And although, as Alison said, numbers in Leicestershire are low, we don't have many exclusions, but nevertheless, we are seeing quite a significant increase in our numbers, and exclusions for children are not good. And it's not a good outcome for children. And we do need to understand a bit more about why we're seeing a rise in permanent exclusions, as well as some of the a rise in the temporary exclusions as well. We have a really strong model in Leicestershire, both in primary and secondary, about how we support children to be successful in school, whether at risk of exclusion. And we're working with schools at the moment to revise that model. And then I think, as you say, we're seeing issues around attendance as well. So I wonder whether we kind of commit to doing a bit of work around really understanding what that looks like for Leicestershire as part of our inclusion report that we bring here, which kind of sets out not just what the reasons are behind some of the changes, but some of the work we're doing to support that, and the work schools are doing to support that as well.
If I could just come in on that as well, the work that we've been doing through the Transforming Centred Inclusion programme as well, the setting specific decision making does have a data set that holds all that information. And as Jane's just articulated, within the inclusion service, we do have some more intelligence around that worrying trend around children being out of education, for children missing education, for all the components sat into there as well. So we can bring that back.
Thank you very much for that response. I have no further questions, but just to repeat again, as I have in previous scrutiny, that the government guidance that was laid out a few years ago on this is excellent, and all parents and all people that are dealing with exclusions in school should use that guidance, because it puts having a child out of a classroom as the absolute #1 priority, and it was excellently written. So just to add that on the end, but thank you very much.
Thank you. Did you want to come back at all, Mrs. Taylor?
No, I think I just reiterate my earlier point about the funding of schools, and I think that kind of leads into this area as well, is that if schools are funded properly, they'll be able to do a lot more to keep children in school, I think, as well. So those two things are really connected to me. So that's one of my key lobbying things at the moment, is funding schools properly.
Right, thank you very much, everybody. I see no more further questions, so we'll move on to item 11, which is children's social care, statutory complaints and compliments. Annual report 2023-24 starts on page 49. And oh yes, just to point out that Councillor Hunt did indicate earlier that he had another meeting at 3 o'clock. So we now move on to page 49. So oh yes, hi. So this is sorry, I'm not doing it. Josie O'Neill. Chelsea, sorry, Chelsea, I'll get there in a minute. Over to you.
Thank you. So yeah, just a brief overview on the social care complaints and education complaints. So they start with the social care complaints. So there was a slight decrease in the complaints received through the statutory social care statutory complaints process. However, there was a significant increase in complaints regarding children's social care, which were considered through the corporate complaints policy. Approximately 1.3% of those using children's services went on to make a complaint, which is in line with the previous year. Majority of complaints received related to child protection matters. So analysis of the complaints received show the main areas complained about were staff conduct, customer care and poor communication. There was a slight decrease in stage 1 complaints from the previous year, down by 6%. And we also saw a decrease in escalations to both stage 2 and stage 3 of the statutory process. Approximately 10% of stage 1 complaints progressed on to stage 2, which again is less than the previous year. So we do continue to receive complaints directly from children and young people, approximately 11%, which again is quite similar to previous years and remains to be a healthy amount. Moving on to timescales, so 63% of complaints were responded to, stage 1 complaints were responded to within the statutory timescales of 20 working days, which is a significant improvement as response timescales were highlighted as a lower compliance rate last year with 31%. So it's good to see there's been improvement in that area. Also saw an improvement with the timescales for the stage 2 panels. 50% of stage 3 panels were held and responded to within the statutory timescales. The remaining ones were delayed, but it was at the complainant's availability to attend the panel hearing. Moving on to the LGO investigations, they investigated 13 complaints and found fault in 6 instances. It is an increase from the previous year, but it's worth noting that it's not directly comparable as it didn't include previous year's the Homes for Ukraine scheme, which wasn't included previously. And the LGO requested remedy payments totaling £2,300, along with recommendations to review policies and procedures, strengthen complaint handling, and to take steps to improve the record keeping. Just on to provide a bit of balance, 20 compliments were received throughout the year. Again, it's an increase from previous year where we saw 11, so it's positive to see that compliments are still being received, and the complaints team still continuing to encourage managers to recognise and share any positive feedback. Overall, there is some good evidence of learning from complaints at a local level, with a number of upheld complaints having clear actions to improve overall wider performance. If I just move on to the corporate complaints and the 2 key areas where there was some significant volumes. So the first one will be SEN complaints. So this service saw 285 complaints during the year, which represented 26% of the total complaints received through the corporate process. Biggest factor in these complaints is delay in meeting the statutory timescales. So still remains to be national and local pressures around capacity of educational psychologists and availability of specialist places. Demand pressure continues to be a significant challenge to reducing the volume of complaints within this area. The other service that received significant volumes of complaints throughout the year was school admissions. So a significant decrease in complaints received relating to school admissions. So it is reflective of the good work that's been completed in that area. The latter 2 quarters, the service has stabilised with few complaints being received. So again, it's reflective of the positive service improvement work that's been carried out throughout the year. I think that's really it for the key points to raise. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Chelsea. Chelsea, and there is a very full report for us all to read or to read at leisure. Did anybody else want to come back? Sharon or Jane at this stage? No. Mrs. Taylor? No. Mr. Frisbee?
I was just a bit confused as to what corporate complaints includes. Can you tell me what that includes?
Yeah, so the corporate complaints is a complaint about any service that the council may offer where there's no statutory process in place. So it could be anything from environment and transport, waste, or for purpose of children's the send complaints and school admissions all fall under the corporate complaints policy as they don't meet the threshold for the statutory complaints process for the children's.
Mr. Martin?
Thank you very much for the report. My question is around the SEND school transport complaints. Obviously, the Senna ones, we've sort of dealt with the sort of key drivers in that, and I agree with Mr. Frisbee on understanding, different ways we can approach problems and sort of attempt to solve that timeliness issue. It's something that we really do need to look at. On the SEND school transport things, it says that basically it's sort of Senna's fault in terms of, not their fault, but that's the reason why them complaints are coming in. And I do agree with that is probably the main driver. The one thing I'm sort of really personally concerned about is understanding safeguarding and compliance within the taxi market. So one of the things I think that is very difficult is, acquiring contracts at last minute. There are complex risk assessments for the children within within these areas, and we sometimes don't have a firm understanding of what the companies are and the compliance that they have. I know that there has been reports recently of taxis without MOTs turning up at families' houses, and non-compliance and cash in hand work for chaperones and things like that. What are we doing with that area to ensure that safeguarding within our transport compliance is absolutely number one when we're making these decisions? Because I do understand that they're very time sensitive and time pressured, but the safety of our most vulnerable children, as was said earlier, is of paramount importance. Thank you.
Does this cross two departments? I'll leave it to you, Jane.
So the responsibility of SEND Transport sits with the environmental transport department, sorry, and is picked up as part of a separate scrutiny body. So we wouldn't be able to answer in detail your question. However, as the director who's responsible for safeguarding, I can share with you, we as an authority who undertakes or kind of commissions vehicles and journeys for all of our children, we have a really robust process in place around assessing and ensuring safeguarding. So two things really. One is that where there are individual complaints or concerns raised, we have dealt with those and we've responded, and where needed, we've investigated. So I think, and then secondly, I guess what we might want to do is pick up that point as part of a separate scrutiny, or indeed we can pick up some of the individual concerns that you might have outside of this meeting, and I can liaise with the director in the Environment and Transport Department to provide a fuller response. But I know the corporate complaints report covers it, but obviously the matters for today's scrutiny around children. So apologies, I can't give you a more detailed answer, but we can certainly pick them up through the Director of Environment and Transport. Thank you.
Frisbee?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chelsea, for the report. I can imagine it's something of a sweet and sour environment to live in, that you hear complaints and compliments in equal measure. Hopefully we hear more compliments than we do complaints. I just want to go back to one of the issues on there, the headline issues that you raised. There's staff conduct, which is always of concern to myself. Is there any anecdotal narrative or reoccurring theme that runs through that staff conduct that we as a local authority should be concerned about? And could it not be argued that the escalation in exclusion and homeschooling might be inextricably linked to the growth in staff conduct complaint? Thank you, Chair.
The staff complaints about staff conduct are normally kind of interlinked, where it's linked to kind of poor communication and overall. In terms of the specific narrative, I wouldn't know the further drill down into the individual cases, but I can certainly, if it's some more information that you require to kind of give a wider narrative, but it's something I'd have to go away and just check the details on.
Chelsea, I apologise. I wasn't in any way trying to hot seat you there, and I was a teacher myself and a staff governor on a number of occasions, and we noticed that when certain staff conducts became erosive or uncomfortable, that's when we noticed that behaviours become erosive and uncomfortable. And I'm just wondering if there's any link. I apologise. I wasn't trying to hot seat you in any way. I was just wondering if there's a reoccurring theme that might be in relation to staff conduct, that we've seen such an exponential growth. So yeah, if there is any narrative and anything we can do more as members to support that, then please let us know. Thank you, Chair.
Jane.
Yeah, sorry, just to add to that, and just for clarity as well. So when this report relates to any complaints around staff conduct, that will be staff who are employed by Leicestershire County Council. No, so it won't relate to the issues you're raising. Complaints for schools would go directly to the schools as a whole process, so both for academies and maintained schools as well. So as Chelsea said, we can drill down into the detail, but this report will relate to, so it won't have an impact on the point you're making.
No,
this report won't.
Superfluous and irrelevant then, Jane. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I see no further comments. Mrs. Taylor, did you want to come back at the day? No? Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Chelsea, for the very full report. And it's nice to see there are compliments as well as complaints. And that's always encouraging. And because sometimes people are, well, anybody can complain quite quickly, but don't very often send in compliments. And I think we're all to blame for that. But thank you, Chelsea. We now move on to item 12, the Leicestershire and Rutland Safeguarding Children's Partnership. Again, and that's another annual report, and it's by Jane Moore. Thank you, Jane.
Yep, thank you, Chair. So the report is provided to you today to seek your views on the draft annual report of the Leicestershire and Rutland Safeguarding Children's Partnership for 23-24. In terms of the annual report, the key purpose of it is to assess the impact of the work undertaken last year on safeguarding outcomes for children in Leicestershire and Rutland, and specifically evaluates the performance against the priorities that we set in the business plan for 23-25. We've appended the draft report to this report. We've outlined within the report the learning assurance, training and improvement activity across the partnership, but also the impact that this has on safeguarding children across Leicestershire and Rutland. In terms of some of the key messages from the report, we know that over the last year, there's been a sustained and demonstrable progress around safeguarding babies, and that was a priority in our business plan last year. We've improved our local procedures, which has been informed by quality assurance and learning. We've increased the number of learning events that we've held, and we've also further promoted the ICON work, which is focused on reducing head trauma in babies, as well as developing and launching our Safer Sleeping Risk Assessment tool. The Safeguarding Partnership has continued to work around child mental health, and that's included receiving assurances from CAMS about the progress of the triage and navigation service, and around improving the quality of referrals for children's emotional and mental health as well. And then just finally, in terms of the resource implications, and we've detailed that at paragraph 15, and that sets out the budgets that the partnership provides to help support the safeguarding partners. So the committee is asked to comment on the draft annual report prior to its finalisation going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. Did anybody have any comments they wanted to make on the report? I thought it was very good, actually, very clear, very understandable. Mr. Martin.
Yeah, I thought it was very clear and understandable, and thank you very much. I have a question that's sort of slightly side, and forgive me if it's not something to answer, but it talks about the multi-agency working, and I remember watching a Dispatches documentary on the family courts and the sort of work around safeguarding within that to support mothers of domestic violence and families of domestic violence cases. And when I saw the multi-agency, the police, the ICB, etc., I was just wondering what the responsibility of the council is to support women and children in domestic violence cases in the courts, and what do we do to champion women and children to ensure that they're as safe and looked after as possible. I know that's slightly sideways, but it's something that I saw and was quite shocked about, and something that I'd really like to understand it more.
Okay, thank you. There are lots of elements of our involvement with the victims of domestic abuse, children who live in domestic abusive situations and environments, and also our work with adults who harm. So we have a responsibility as a local authority to look at a domestic abuse plan and strategy. We have a responsibility and do carry out a needs assessment, and we manage and monitor a grant that's given to us regarding domestic abuse that has a focus on how we meet our responsibilities under the domestic abuse legislation, which has a particular focus on the provision of accommodation. So it's support to victims, it's support to adults who harm, support to children, refuge, accommodation, and how we support those individuals to be able to live safely and outside of an abusive relationship, or to work with the adults involved, depending on the nature of that abuse, to minimise the abuse and the impact. As a children and families department, as well as leading some of that work that I've just outlined, we have an extended domestic abuse team within the service. So they work very closely with the police and our front door, reviewing any referrals and complaints that are received by the police in relation to domestic abuse incidents. And they are assessed as those where it's a more not as high a risk a situation, where we're reaching out and making contact with those victims and making sure they've got the right support in place, and we can help them, whether that's helping them leave, whether that's helping them with the legal process and going through a court process to get any sort of enforcement orders, or whether that is helping them and their children and possibly the adult that harms to work through what are those issues around their relationship that's leading to the domestic abuse. We also, as part of that service, have an individual that focuses on safer relationship work with our care leavers. So we are proactively working with our care leavers as they become young adults and into parenthood and some of the difficulties to make sure that they can work on those safer, healthier relationships rather than getting into the domestic abuse arena. And we have a responsibility and do lead on parental conflict and the difference between arguing safely and what our adults in a healthy relationship might work through a difficulty or a disagreement, as opposed to those where domestic abuse arises and violence occurs. So we have a vast range of services that we provide at different levels and with different individuals around domestic abuse.
Thank you for that. It's really interesting. Do the social workers specifically get any support engaging with the courts? Because I think the courts are a very complex system, and I have no personal experience of this, but for understanding it can be fraught with sort of legal complexity. Do the social workers get support to sort of help with that side of things, to support the victims?
There isn't a specific support to the social workers other than we're talking about workers who are used to working within a court arena anyway and have experience of working within that arena. And the key work is about supporting the individual to get the legal representation within the court. So there isn't specific training or support for our social workers in going into court to advocate in cases of domestic abuse, but there is a lot of work with our staff around being within the court arena, giving evidence within that court arena. But I think in relation to the domestic abuse, the support and experience is around making sure that we support individuals where it's right to do so to get the right legal advice that's out there.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Taylor, did you want to come back and talk now? But thank you. Another very full report, and thank you very much indeed. We move on to item, the final item of the agenda, which is item 13 on page 143. And it's the annual report of the independent reviewing officer. And Sharon, you're taking this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll take you through the report, and I am joined by Ollie Martin, who's the service manager for this area of work. So if there are any specific questions after I've taken you through the report, Ollie will support in answering them. So the committee have before you, as you do annually, the report of the independent reviewing officers. So this is the report on the period March 23 to March 24. The report outlines the statutory duties and responsibilities both of the local authority to have independent reviewing officers, but then the role and duty and responsibility of independent reviewing officers who, for the in a simple term, are independent chairs, some of who independently chair our child protection conferences, and some of whom independently chair the meetings, the review of arrangement meetings for our children who are in care. So this report takes you through their responsibilities, and predominantly their responsibilities to our looked after children, to provide that independence, to be an advocate in as much as making sure that if their oversight of that care planning, if they are overseeing that the right things are in place and people are doing the right things for our children and young people, and if there are any concerns or delays, that they are somebody there to challenge those, and if they don't see progress made, can escalate that appropriately, either through the department to myself, and we have, as the report says, have regular challenge meetings where they will bring to my attention any issues for our children and young people that aren't being resolved in a timely and appropriate way. And they can act independently of us to take a matter to court if it was so extreme and they felt that the local authority was failing to meet our responsibilities for a child under their care order. Obviously, that would be, we hope, would be far and few between, but it just gives the scope of the role. So the report outlines the, as I say, the responsibilities and duties of the independent reviewing officers, and then paragraph 10 onwards takes you through some of the focus of work. So last year we reported on the work that was being done following the pandemic and how we were ensuring this oversight and the role of the independent reviewing officers continued to be strengthened. and this report takes you through what's happened in the period after then. So it takes you through the actual performance data, so how successful our reviewing officers have been on engaging children, ensuring voice, the performance that they're measured against, so the timeliness of those review of arrangement meetings, and there are statutory requirements as to when those meetings happen, any issues about how they would escalate those concerns, but also how they've taken a lead and a responsibility in some key areas of development. So development around their own roles, ensuring that their footprint is clearly across a child's case record, so they see the child, they make sure their voice is represented within the meeting, and they periodically go in between those reviews to check that there is a progress of the work that's been agreed as part of the care planning. The report also takes you through some key areas of work that have happened with our Children in Care Council and the language of care, which is a toolkit that's been developed. Next year's report will give you more detail on how the progress of implementing that toolkit, but this is a key piece of work led by our Children in Care and their voice, supported very much by the corporate parenting team that sit within the safeguarding unit under Holly, but also the role of the independent reviewing officers in ensuring that within the reviews we are embedding that toolkit. So I think that report, the report in its entirety is attached for members to read, and right at the back is a one-page that's been completed. You've seen this in the last few years where the main points have been put into one page, so it's distributed to our children and young people in a way that's easier to understand and digest. So I think that takes you through all the key points, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Mrs. Taylor, did you want to come back at that?
No, just to say their work's vitally important for all of us within the department. So yeah, we really appreciate the work they do. No, nothing to add specifically other than I guess we've got a really great group of independent reviewing officers that are really passionate about their work, really passionate about the work they do with children, and really playing that vital role as advocate and driving those quality plans. So our staff are really proud of what they do. So that's just a really nice thing to report back to you all, I guess.
Thank you very much. It's a really good report. I encourage all our councillors, not just that sit on various scrutiny committees, to look at all the reports because they are worthwhile. Find out what's going on in your own council. But thank you very much. Right. We have come to item 14, the date of the next meeting, and that will take place. Get your sparklers ready, 5th of November. And so, yes, so it will be on the 5th of November at the usual time. But I thank you all very much for attending, and I now have pleasure in closing the meeting. Thank you.